Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Daryl Henry. I'm the Executive Director of the Western Caucus Foundation. And I had a quick question about the Western Caucus, so I thought I'd just give a quick briefing on it. It was originally formed about 28 years ago by members of Congress from 4 states, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah. And they ganged together because they were tired of getting beaten up by people from other states that didn't understand the federal lands and the issues and the space that we have out here in the West. So it started with that, and then it kind of has moved across the country. We kind of now say it's Western and rural America because the issues of rural America are so much like the issues of the Western United States. Chairman Dan Newhouse can tell you a little bit more about the caucus and the members, but it has grown. We're the foundation. We're the C3 nonprofit. I like to say we're the cultural exchange program for the Western Caucus. We like to educate people about what we do out here in the West and bring folks and put boots on the ground, staff, members, other folks from parts of the country to see what's going on in the West and kind of take the issues that we have here back to Washington, D.C. so that we're legislating on and people understand what's happening here on the ground. So we do these around the country and around the West a few times a year. Haven't been to Arizona in a few years, so happy to be back. Came here a lot as a child, growing up, so love the Phoenix area. So with that, we have a great program and some great speakers, so I'm going to kick it over to our chairman from Washington's 4th District, Dan Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Can you hear me? Is this working? Awesome. Big room, but smaller group, so we'll see how this works. But welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Arizona. We're not in Phoenix anymore, are we? Peoria. We're in Peoria. I'm a farm boy from central Washington state. When I looked out the window this morning and the sun shining and the irrigation running and the fields are green, I thought, wow, this is awesome. At home, it's not quite like that yet up north. But thanks to all of you for coming. I want to especially thank our hostess, my good friend Debbie Lesko. This is going to be a great tour that we're going to have and experience here and talk about some really, really important issues. Things like, I don't know how the heck you guys do it down here, but manage yourselves through the drought conditions we've been having for so long. Well, this is an arid area to begin with, but then the conditions we've been facing throughout the West are, I think, fully illustrated right here in Arizona. And how you deal with that, we can all learn something from. And then the other issue that we're going to be seeing firsthand, the whole subject of critical minerals, and how do we move on to the future that a lot of people have in mind if we don't utilize the resources that God gave us right here in the United States of America? We've got to match those two concepts, I think. So I'm really looking forward to learning way more about both of those things. It's great to have a good, I was going to say old friend, but long-time friend, Brenda Berman with us today. Great to see her. And as Daryl said, the Western Caucus had very humble beginnings, but a very noble purpose to educate people around the country as to the challenges that we face in the Western United States and rural America. And as humbly as I can say, I am so proud to be chairman of the Western Caucus, to see what it has grown into, the unique position of influence that it holds in Congress, which has grown and is actually pretty darn good. And I hope people are proud of what we have become. We have girls, ladies, almost 75 members now. I'm not sure how many were in the first group. You met in a phone booth somewhere on Capitol Hill, right? Yeah. But it's, like everything else, we stand on the shoulders of those who went before us that started something that was really good. And we're really proud to be associated with it. And we thank all of you for being here and helping to make this a very successful couple days. I want to turn to another colleague, one of my vice chairman of the Western Caucus, for a few thoughts, 30 seconds worth of hello. Mr. LaMalfa from the great state of California. Doug?
Good morning. Glad to be here with everybody as we take on some really weighty issues. I'm proud to be part of the Western Caucus group, and I appreciate Dan really injecting, building on what Paul Gosar did and kind of putting some energy back into this. And Dan has taken it to even a better level as well with our issues. And as he said, we recruit people from all over the country. It doesn't have to be west of the Mississippi. We got GT from Western Pennsylvania. And I'm working on Claudia Cheney from Western New York. They are rural issues. And we all, as we're seeing with this overused maybe term supply chain, things that people rely on come from areas like ours. I'm a rice farmer in my real life. We're wondering where we're going to get the water to continue what we do in agriculture. We're taking massive cuts. And so it'll be very interesting to see how Arizonans who don't have quite the abundance, how they are able to stretch things. Good chat with Ms. Atkins here about what they're doing. So I appreciate the time and the ability to be here. Thank you all.
I think I'm up. I'm Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, and you're in my congressional district. And I want to thank in the back, who is holding up the phone, Jason Beck, for hosting us here today and buying us breakfast and I think lunch as well. Jason has really grown this facility, Tier Tactical. They make body armor for law enforcement and Department of Defense, I think, FBI, those type of things. And so you're going to see later, I believe, the operation where they're actually making that. Jason is also running for mayor of this great city, and I'm supporting him on that. You saw the van as you drove in. That was really in a conspicuous place there, Jason, right as you drove in. My congressional district is part of Phoenix and the northern and western suburbs of Phoenix. So if Phoenix was in the middle, we're in Peoria, which is northwest of Phoenix. For those of you that are joining us for the hockey game tomorrow, that's also in my congressional district in Glendale. I also have Luke Air Force Base in our district where they train F-35 pilots. I have mostly an urban area, but there are some farming areas around Luke Air Force Base because of the no-fly zone, or not no-fly zone, but the no development zone around the Luke Air Force Base. So we have some farmers that have really become quite wealthy, don't you think, Lisa, around there, because they've sold their property to different companies. Like we have Red Bull, Ball Corporation, Amazon, Sub-Zero. We have lots of, and in our congressional district is going to be the new Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation is being built in our congressional district as well in North Phoenix. Listen, I have and I also want to thank all of the people that have joined us in the roundtable. I think this is very interesting. I applaud the Western Caucus for these trips. I really learn a lot in these, so I hope that you really learn a lot as well. As we found out, well, I guess during the pandemic, but also now during the war in Ukraine, I believe the United States has to be more self-sufficient on energy and critical minerals, and that has come to the forefront, and people are starting to realize that. And so it just frustrates the heck out of me when the Biden administration the other night at the State of the Union said we should buy in America, make in America. I agree, but then why are we buying Russian oil? And why are we buying minerals from foreign countries? And why are they shutting down permits for your copper mine? I mean, they say one thing and do another. Drives me absolutely nuts. But I have the great honor of introducing Lisa Atkins, who's sitting to my left. And I have known Lisa for many years, and she used to work for Congressman Bob Stump. And just a super knowledgeable woman. She is now the commissioner of the Arizona State Land Department. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very, very much. Well, welcome to Arizona. I am so pleased to be able to spend some time with members of the Western Caucus. And I was telling the chairman that Congressman Stump and Jim Hansen were among the founders of Western Caucus. So this organization has a very special place in my heart. And I never would have been dreaming that after spending 20 years on the Hill with a gentleman who retired as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, was very proud that Luke Air Force Base was in his district, and represented essentially at that time half the state of Arizona, that I would have an opportunity to talk about some issues that are still very relevant to the state of Arizona. The State Land Department was one of the original departments that was created at statehood to manage a portfolio of land that was given to the state solely for the purpose of being managed in perpetuity to generate revenue for 13 defined beneficiaries, the largest of which is K-12. And for the benefit of the members who might be able to understand one perspective, I do have a map. The second map that I'm handing you has the footprint. Yeah, let's send them around. Okay, you can have them. Thank you, sir. Has a footprint of where federal lands are in the United States, and you can see by the map. Thank you, sir. That there is a significant impact to the Western United States based on federal lands. That's also one of the founding issues of the Western Caucus, was to address how the land was managed in the Western states because of the federal footprint. The other map that I've provided to the members shows the land ownership pattern in the state of Arizona. And for those of you who are from Arizona, I'm going to give you some numbers that you probably have never heard before. That is that the land in the portfolio of the state trust is 9.2 million acres. We have 90% of what the feds gave the state of Arizona at statehood. The rest of the land in the state is 28%. So 42% of the land in the state of Arizona is federal. 28% are tribal lands. 17.3% is private, and there is about 13% of the entire state's footprint that is state trust land. The portfolio is supposed to be monetized over time. It's supposed to generate revenue. Right now, there's $8 billion in the Treasurer's office that is being managed from the sale of lands and mineral royalties. If you look at it from an economic development standpoint, and which will inform the two subjects that I'd like to bring up, if you combine private land and state trust land, which we hope will be sold for private uses over time, that is 30% of the entire land base of the state of Arizona. Everything else in the state of Arizona is owned or managed by the federal government, which means that the entire weight of the economy is not only on the private land that we already have, but eventually will be part of the portfolio when we sell it to private land or private landowners. Congresswoman Lesko mentioned that TSMC purchased land in the state of Arizona to build a chip making plant. I'm very proud to say that that land was state trust land. And it's going to kick off the development even further in the western part of the valley, as it has contributed to not only the Desert Ridge area for those of you that are here, but also in the eastern part of the valley. We have sold during Governor Ducey's tenure almost $2 billion worth of land, thanks to a very, very robust market, which I'm proud of. Our land sales are not just in Maricopa County, which is the economic hub of the state. That's not true. We have economic hubs in 15 counties in the state, just in case you aren't aware of that. We're currently doing business in 8 of those counties, certainly in Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima County, which is the business corridor at this time, but also in communities in Coconino, Mojave, Yavapai, Cochise, and Apache. So wherever we have a footprint. But we're running into a management problem with state trust land. There's a significant amount of state trust land that has been trapped in not necessarily wilderness areas, but certainly in national monument footprints that we do not have access to. There are subsurface minerals that we don't have access to because they're either in wilderness areas or in national monuments. I'm very proud to tell you that we think we have some rare earth minerals in the portfolio, which is very exciting for me, knowing the critical importance of that classification. We also have a lot of copper in this state, as you're going to hear about pretty soon. And we're blessed with those assets in Arizona. But I will tell you that those assets are difficult for the land department to be able to access because of the surface management particularly of the national monuments. There have been proposals that have come before the Congress in the past, which are known as ACE, which would allow us an opportunity to do some land exchanges, to be able to compensate the trust and the beneficiaries for the value of that land that is trapped, and that will come to the attention of the Congress again. We're also doing a significant amount of wind and solar development in the state of Arizona. BLM has been a very good example for us of how to step into that particular field. But with a growing population, you also have a growing number of impacts on land outside the urban core. And we're grappling now with how we manage recreation throughout the state of Arizona, working as closely as we can with BLM because our footprint is fairly similar. And I also don't want to fail to mention how grateful we are for the for-fry attention that the federal government has helped the state of Arizona with. To lose that amount of forested land is devastating, not just to lose the forested land, but also the impacts that happen when we have fires and then rain. The state land portfolio suffers from those same impacts that federal land does. So the fact that you're here taking a look at that, I hope that ACE will come back so that we can get state trust lands out from underneath the footprint of national monuments and be able to recognize the value of what was given to us at statehood, both from a surface standpoint and a subsurface standpoint. Otherwise, we have no access to those. And also, I'm grateful for the attention that the members of Congress and the administration paid to for-fry, because it's a significant problem in Arizona that we appreciate all the assistance. I'm so glad you're here. You have experts that are going to be talking to you. We do a lot of ag and grazing as a lease opportunity to manage the portfolio. But as you can tell from the map, it is an intermingled land pattern that is a critical part to the state's economy and needs to be managed in such a way, and a partnership with the federal agencies and their ability to carry their own weight, particularly BLM and Forest Service as far as the management of their assets, has a very definite impact on our ability to serve the beneficiaries, the largest of which is K-12. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or just know how happy we are that you're here. And I am more than happy to be on call to you if there's ever anything that the State Land Department can help with. Thank you.
I have to introduce someone that I forgot to introduce, and that is a state senator who represents this area, Rick Gray, who's sitting right there in the front. Rick Gray does a great job. He is the majority leader in the state Senate, and he replaced me in the state Senate, so I did good. We you know, he's doing a great job. Thanks, Rick.
Does that mean he's going to follow you to Washington too then? No. No announcements. So I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. And just real quickly before I do that, one of the reasons that we're here, I just want to be clear, is we want to bring the local voices of this area of the country back to Washington, D.C. and elevate your voice. That's our function. So other people understand what it is that you're facing, challenges you face. So thank you for helping us do that. And we've got some members here, but we've also got some members represented here. And I want to have, if possible, if they'd like to, the staffs from Mr. Buddy Carter from Georgia, Kevin Hearn from Oklahoma, Andy Biggs and David Schweitzer's staff from Arizona, and also Pete Stauber's staffer from Minnesota. You guys could raise your hands just so people know that there's a lot of ears and eyes in this group that are paying attention. So thank you guys for being here. Now, one of our other featured speakers, Miss Brenda Berman from the Central Arizona Project. She joined just recently, 2021, the CAP. I guess that's what you call it. Okay. And she's a new executive strategy advisor, but she's got more than 25 years experience working on Western water issues. and natural resource issues. So she's very almost overqualified for every position that she is put into. I know she's committed to finding collaborative solutions for all of us, for local communities, for tribes, for everybody that depends on precious resources. Prior to this position, Ms. Berman was, as you know, the director of the Bureau of Reclamation. And she just, I got to tell you, she was fantastic. Great to work with. We got a lot done under her administration. And I just want to publicly thank you very much for that. So Brenda?
Thank you, Chairman Newhouse, for your kind words. We worked together closely when I was Commissioner of Reclamation, and I think we got a lot done. Welcome, everyone, to those visiting Arizona. This is our great time of year. We thought it was going to be cold today and wintry, but so far it's holding out. So I hope it does that for all of your tours today. I have some visuals. So I think you've been hearing about the water situation in the West. And by the West, when I talk about it, I mean the Colorado River. And I thought it might help to have some visuals because you'll see national headlines, and I think that means people are starting to think about us in a way they didn't before. But this is a picture of the Colorado River Basin. And altogether, this hardworking river serves 40 million people between the United States and Mexico. We serve about 5 million acres of agricultural land. And it's generally divided into two basins. So when people talk about the Colorado River Basin, if you're the upper basin, you're Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. And if you're in the lower basin, that's California, Arizona, and Nevada. And the two split right about at Lake Powell, which is Glen Canyon Dam in Arizona. And so this is not an easy place to work with each other, right? Because we're crossing 7 states. We have 30 tribes. We have established old agricultural interests with very senior rights. We have newer municipalities like Denver, Los Angeles, Albuquerque, Phoenix, Tucson, that rely on the Colorado River. We also, it is some of the major power production for clean hydropower, which not only has run the grid for almost 100 years, but is also responsible for backing up all of that renewable energy that people are looking for. So if you're putting in solar, a lot of times you make sure that you have Parker Davis or Hoover Power to back it up, because that's what you need to firm it. So we also flow through Grand Canyon National Park, which if you haven't been, I suggest you come back to Arizona and see, because it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. But this is the Colorado River for Arizona. Let's go to the next slide. Arizona, I represent the Central Arizona Project now. This is the incredible engineering marvel, which is the Central Arizona Project Canal, which cuts across really the entire state to bring Colorado River in. Our entitlement is about 2.8 million acre feet. If you're not from a place that uses acre feet is, in Arizona, it's about 1 acre foot serves probably 2 to 3 homes, families a year. So it's a lot of water. And this engineering marvel you will see part of on your tour. You are going out to New Waddell Dam and Lake Pleasant, and that is a regulating reservoir for us and also a great recreational area. And that allows us to bring water in from the Colorado in these winter months when people aren't running their air conditioners, when the grid has capacity, when energy prices are low, and we can put that water into Lake Pleasant. And then in the summer, when the grid is at its toughest, we're making sure we all help California stay with their lights on. We bring our water out of Lake Pleasant. And so we are able to serve most of our water supply in the summer through bringing water in when it's cheap. And also we create hydropower when we move the water. You'll see that today. But we are one of the last reclamation projects. Some of you are also going to be flying over the first reclamation project in Arizona, which is the Salt River Project later in the day. And that brought together the Salt River, the Verde River to supply the valley and the valley farmland. Back in 1912, I believe they finished the first dam. So we have a long history of working with reclamation, of harnessing our water supplies in Arizona. to make sure that we have a reliable supply for all of our different communities. And just a note for background, CAP, because it was built, authorized in 1968, we have a later water right. So we are under prior appropriation in the West, which means the first people who got to the water have the best right to the water. So if you're on the main stem of the Colorado River, we have incredible farming areas like Yuma, Arizona. We have many tribes. California did a lot of investment before CAP. So CAP is known as a junior user. So let's move on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the hydrology because you've probably heard some headlines, and I wanted to kind of find some ways to show it in pictures. But this is the combined storage between Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam, so Lake Mead and Lake Powell. These are the two largest reservoirs in the United States of America, and back in the year 2000, they were basically full. So together they hold 50 million acre feet. And this is the history. And as you can see, since the year 1980, we've had a precipitous drop, and you come down to 2021, and it's at its lowest level, not only in my lifetime, which I got to announce to folks as commissioner back in 2019, but it's now at its lowest point kind of before we started filling Glen Canyon Dam. But what are we doing about it? Let's go to the next slide. There's a lot of reasons this is happening. Some of them are that we're using a lot of water, but a lot of this has to do with what's happening with precipitation and snowfall. And so if you look on the right, what we're trying to show is this is the water that basically comes into Lake Powell. It's a history of what kind of water flows into Lake Powell. And it's been dropping. The average has been dropping. We have been in a 22-year, they're calling it a mega drought. And what we've seen is the average keeps dropping, which is a little frightening. So you look at the long-term average, almost 15 million acre feet. That's about what all the states decided on back in the 1920s. They were going to split between themselves. But the 20-year average has dropped, and the 10-year average is 11.8 million acre feet. And unfortunately, every month this year, December, we had a lot of rain. January, we didn't have any. February, we barely had any. And every time we hear from the Forecast Center, they reduce their forecast runoff by about 1 million acre feet. So this could end up being a very bad year. You can go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about the hydrology of the last couple of years. So I said it's not just about the snowfall and the rainfall, because we actually had about average rain and snow in 2020. But what happened? We hadn't had our monsoons that year in the summer. It was parched, and our runoff was only 56%. And so even when we're getting the same kind of rain we used to get before, we're not getting the runoff. And it's making a big effect. 2021 was even worse. I believe it was the third worst runoff in the history of record keeping. A bunch of scientists have decided that this 22-year drought is the worst in the paleo history, meaning they've gone back 1,200 years and looked, and we've never had a 20-year period that was this dry. So I don't want you to think everyone's been sitting around going, oh no, it's dry. Because we have a lot of data on this river. We have a lot of working together. If you go to the next slide. Let me start with CAP. So CAP, as I said, is a junior user in general. But within CAP, we have different priorities for water. And through a lot of different deals that were made back in the early 2000s, agriculture agreed to take on the lowest priority. They did that in exchange for taking on a reduced price. So the deal was back in the early 2000s that agriculture would receive cheaper water, affordable water until 2030, but they would take the lowest priority in case anything happened. Well, something has happened. And back in 2007, we were in a 7-year drought. We thought it was the worst we'd ever seen. So the states came together with the federal government, and we put in guidelines. How are we going to look at shortage? How are we going to face this? And we set up rules of the road. We'll have shortages when Lake Mead hits different levels, and we'll incentivize conservation, meaning people can use free storage in Lake Mead. Put your water behind Lake Mead. Help shore up Lake Mead. And we did that, and it's worked for many years. So there's been millions of dollars of investment by all sorts of different folks to keep water in Lake Mead. And it meant that we could have been in shortage back in 2014, and instead we had tier 0 shortage, which is something of the last couple of years. And this year is the first year we're having a tier 1 shortage. Well, let me show you what happens in a tier 1 shortage if you hit the next button. So we lose about a third of our water supply. Supply for CAP is all Colorado River water, and many places delivering people who have other supplies. They might have Salt River Project water, they might have groundwater, they might have reuse. So a lot of the different communities have different water supplies. But for CAP, we're a wholesaler, we bring in Colorado River. And the ag pool is the first that's hit. And also something we call NIA, that's lower priority water, and it goes to communities, it goes to tribes. So there's some farming, a lot of communities. But if you go to the next slide, what we did in Arizona is we got together, and Lisa Atkins didn't mention, but she's also a board member of Central Arizona Project and was president while we were all trying to work through some of the most difficult issues Arizona has faced about how will we really take cuts here. And what the state did is they came together. We had about 40 different parties across all the different sectors of Arizona. And we came up with a mitigation plan. Like, how do we have a softer landing? Because ag, it was going to take a very sharp hit. We thought that might happen back in 2020. We managed to stave that off until this year, 2022. But we came up with mitigation water. So that's coming from different cities, that's coming from reclamation, it's coming, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's water. We also did that for the NIA parties, that's major cities like Phoenix and Glendale, and I think Peoria might be in there. But it's also tribes, and find ways to soften the blow of the first year of a really bad shortage. So to keep going. So again, we haven't just been sitting around. This is a basin. These are 7 basin states who came together back in 1922 to find ways to work together. Many of you work in basins that are just under litigation. Mr. Lamalfa, Mr. Newhouse. And we all have seen how well that works. The Colorado River has stayed out of litigation for the last, really the modern era, I call it, the last 25, 30 years. And we've been able to do that by coming together and finding really tough solutions that work across borders. And that includes agreements with Mexico about how we'll take shortage. So this is a history of a lot of the different agreements. Some of them taken legislation. Back in 2007, I told you we did the shortage guidelines. 2019, we knew we were still in a drought. It was worse than we thought. We had to put more on the table. For that, we needed to go to Congress. And thank you to our congressional members. That legislation passed in 3 weeks. It was absolutely unheard of. But what we've learned in the last couple of years is even what we put on the table, that 500,000 acre feet that CAP is taking this year, it wasn't enough. And so this past year in December, the states came back together with the Federal Bureau of Reclamation and formed an agreement. We're going to put 500,000 more acre feet on the table each year until 2026. And so what that means is in 2022, the 3 lower basin states will be taking 1 million less acre feet, which is almost about a quarter of the supply in Colorado River. So it's called the 500 Plus Plan. We haven't gone to Congress looking for authorization. We have gone to Congress looking for the federal government to kind of be a partner in this. If you go to the next slide. So the federal government is putting up $100 million and the states are matching. So from Arizona, that's 60 million, and then California and Nevada are both put up $20 million. That's for this kind of emergency go out, find 500,000 acre feet in a few months, which is almost unheard of, but we're doing it. And I'll just mention for future, places like the Everglades, places like the Chesapeake Bay, I'm less familiar with Great Lakes, they have been receiving federal attention for a really long time. In the West, we don't seek federal attention so much, right? We run it ourselves, we do it ourselves. But when I think about the kinds of dollars that have gone to Everglades and Chesapeake and these other interests of the United States, and then I see $100 million for Colorado River, I think this might be a time for investment. This might be, if the hydrology continues as it is, it might be a time for investment. And right now we're using this for a lot of short-term work, but we've had our eye on the ball for long-term work. There are places we can work on our infrastructure on the river. There are places we can work on our infrastructure within town. And we're doing that. We're looking at efficiencies that can be invested in for agriculture. So maybe they can use less water and transfer that to other places. But it is a very serious time on the Colorado River. We have handled it. Our different communities here have been investing in different water resources. We know we can handle what we see in front of us, but there's a lot in front of us. So there's going to be a lot to do. There's a lot of people working together across the basin. We do not plan on taking this to a judge and letting them run this river. That's our history. That's what we're going to stick with. We've always appreciated the partnership in Congress that's helped us and let us do that. But that's our situation right now on the Colorado River in Arizona, and I thank everybody for helping us learn about it here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate the comments and the scaring the heck out of us this early in the morning. Don't use horror movies in your next, but seriously, that's wow. What you guys are facing down here, what we're facing in the West is tremendous challenge, and that's an understatement. And it's going to take all of us working together to get through this. We've got some time for some questions. And I think, certainly those of us up here at the table want to hear, maybe have some questions, and we'll have opportunity for that. But you guys that are from this area, maybe you even have more pertinent questions than we could think to ask. So I'm going to open it up to the whole floor to be able to have a conversation for just a few minutes here before we go to our next panel. And if I could start, as being the chairman, I get that privilege, right? I can't help but think, Brenda, that when you put $500 million to bring in water, you can't create water, so you're taking it from somewhere, right? So that has to somehow limit economic development, growth in cities and communities, acreage being farmed, all kinds of things are hitting a brick wall in growth, and I would think. So I guess, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing. I know in California there's acres being idled. We've faced that up in Yakima Valley before. Give us an idea of how, and maybe Stephanie can expound on this later too, but tell us what does the agricultural picture look like as far as our ability to produce the crops we need?
Oh, I think Stephanie is probably the best qualified for that, and I'll look forward to the agricultural panel. But what I'll say is this affected CAP served for agriculture Pinal County, and also agriculture in Maricopa and down in Pima, that's more the Tucson area, but overwhelmingly the Pinal County area. And while we saw this on the horizon, they were taking 300,000 acre feet of water for their crops, and that doesn't exist. And when the Bureau of Reclamation puts out its forecast for the next 5 years, it doesn't look like it's going to exist for the next 5 years. So the state, all the different parties of the state came together for that mitigation water this year. Next year is going to be very tough in central Arizona. On the main stem, they have the higher and best priority rights, whether that's Yuma or whether that's the Colorado River Indian tribes and other areas on the main stem. And we are going to them. A lot of the water that we've been looking for in the short term is coming from cities. Yesterday, the board voted on, I think it was 11 or 12 contracts with cities. But that's always smaller amounts of water at the time. What can they give up? And it's compensated. The tribe, Gila River Indian Community, has come up with over 100,000 acre feet to put towards this process this year. So it's working with tribes, it's working with ag. We've been having a lot of discussions on river, Mojave, Yuma, about what can be contributed. And there's a lot of money on the table right now. But we also know that's short term, right? So if you do that this year, great. Maybe that gets us over a hump this year, but what happens next year? And so we're also looking at long-term solutions such as a little bit of a better storage system on the Colorado River. Right now we have the large storage, but if we get a storm or if a lot of people order water and then it rains, that water just ends up flowing to Mexico. outside of what should be delivered under the treaty. So we have places where we have regulating reservoirs. We could probably put another one in. One that we have doesn't work very well. We could invest in that. There are different, we can be investing perhaps in, Mexico. Can we find some water there? But it seems like there are places to invest in our own infrastructure in Arizona and California and Nevada and in our, along the river for places we can find. But this is going to be very devastating to interior Arizona agriculture.
Well, thanks very much, Brenda. I have a question for either one of you, if you know the answer. So I don't assume people know where these lakes are. I don't know if that was mentioned or not. But Lake Mead, it's Hoover Dam, so it's northwest of here, and then Lake Powell is north by the Utah border, and that's Glen Canyon Dam, and they produce electricity as well. And so I have two questions. One, what's the effect, if you know it, on the production of electricity from the reduced level of the lakes? And also, my next question is, I believe you said that the Pinal, which is south of here, by the way, so Phoenix is here and Pinal is south. It's on the way to Tucson. Pinal County farmers took the hit first. And so I think instead of using the Central Arizona Project Canal for their water, now they have to use water well, right? And so I was wondering what the implications of that are on the aquifer, and if there's limits on how much water they can pump in the well from their wells. I don't know who wants to answer.
What I'll say is the groundwater is really under the purview of the Department of Water Resources. So I'm not an expert on groundwater. We have something called the Groundwater Management Act that went in 1980 and was really, at the time, kind of the most progressive groundwater regulation in the United States. And that really affects the Phoenix area, Maricopa County, Pinal County, Pima County. And what's happened is there's been a lot of groundwater use over the years. And while agriculture can turn back to groundwater, we are running into problems in Pinal, particularly about physical availability. So you might have a right to pump that groundwater, but whether you can get to it or whether it's affordable to get to it, given how far you have to pump, is a whole nother question. There has been some investment by the state and by the Department of Ag in that area to help. But I think others could probably talk to that better.
Except that I would bring to the members' attention that the governor has made a very recent announcement about a significant investment of funds to gather everybody in the water community to start looking at what other options might be available for the state. So in addition to watching very carefully what the hydrologic system is as far as the Colorado River water, and the anticipation for decades that Arizona being the junior water user, we have planned for that all along. We're looking at what other options might be available to generate water. And I believe he has identified close to $1 billion of funds that will be available for the state to look at alternatives.
Other questions? Mr. O'Malley? Any questions? Mr. Senator?
Here, sir. I appreciate the aspect about water, and yes, the governor is doing that. We're looking at that, actually starting a new water authority in Arizona. But I think, and this may apply more to SRP than CAP, but it definitely applies to the West, and that's the number. We've got millions of acres of federal forests in Arizona. And unfortunately, that has not been maintained appropriately. And so we get overgrowth because it hasn't been thinned, and then we get major fires that cost us money. But apart from that, just as we talk about water, some of the figures I've heard on how much a tree will suck up on water is amazing to me. So the impact on failing to thin the forest has a huge impact on the watershed that we have in the state of Arizona. So I think, you know, it's one thing to handle the river water, which we're doing, I think, as well as possible. But I think, and I want to accent the point that with our federal forests, we need the feds to actually maintain, which means thin, our federal forests out to protect our watershed. That's, again, should be another major issue in our Western Caucus.
We couldn't agree more. It absolutely is, and appreciate that very much. You're echoing Bruce Westerman, who is our ranking member of the House Natural Resources Committee, our only forester in Congress, and he says the same thing every time we get together. So that's a message we're trying to get through to the federal government as often as possible. Mr. Beck, again, thanks for your hospitality today.
I appreciate everybody being here. So 2 questions. I'm a manufacturer at heart. So has CAP possibly looked at, have you guys gone to Israel, looked at the Jordan River Valley, or looked at the Sinai and actually how agriculture is actually done there? That's the first question. Second question is, in Israel along the Jordan River, they actually do miniature power turbines where they're actually small turbines throughout their water districts, which actually drop in to create electricity. Have you guys looked at anything like that at all?
A lot of us have looked to Israel because they're another arid state, and they've invested in their water supply in a way that's like incredibly interesting, because they used to really serve agriculture and the cities from the Sea of Galilee, and it flowed by gravity south, kind of eventually ending up in the Mediterranean. And they've completely reinvested in desalination and use that more expensive water for the cities, allowing agriculture to continue to use the less expensive gravity flow, kind of more natural supply. And they've done incredible work. What we've done at CAP with help from investment from others is we've been working with farmers in Harquahala, over at the Colorado River Indian tribes, at one of the technologies that we've brought from over there. And the company is actually set someone here, and it's called NDRIP. And it's really incredible. It is a non-pressurized gravity-fed drip system. So you don't need the big pumps. You don't need the energy. You don't need to filter it first. And we've been testing this out, and it looks like you can get the same yield for probably a third less water. And that could make a big difference in Arizona and other arid places. So the original tests in the Harquahala Valley look very promising. They're testing it out on the Crit, which is more sandy. So we'll see if it works in different places. But we've certainly, we've had different board members and different interests come to us with a lot of the ideas about technology. So we're trying to invest in them and see what works, but also working with partners to make sure we bring in that investment from other places too. So we have the smaller hydro on New Waddell Dam, and when you see it, it's a really kind of cool engineering feat that you can either bring water in or you can take water out. When you take water out, that's when you're running your pumps. I can't speak to CAP's recent studies. I wasn't around for them, but what I'll tell you with Reclamation is Reclamation did a very large comprehensive study just a few years ago about what are all the places we could have small hydro in the West. And that study is available online. It's fully public. A lot of different water districts have taken advantage of it because you can come in and you become a partner with Reclamation. You put your own infrastructure in, you take advantage of that opportunity. And if you think it's worth the investment, you can work with Reclamation and do that. So we're a Reclamation facility, but we run it and operate it. And we've done that since it was built. So I do believe they've looked at that in the past, but I don't know what the most recent information is.
I do know that my colleague up in Washington, Kathy McMorris Rogers, has had legislation looking at exactly that, putting generators, turbines in canals and our delivery system. So, yes, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you. I think I'm the only one here from Southern Arizona. And first of all, I'm saddened to say that our elected officials down Southern Arizona aren't as enthusiastic about being involved in this issue. And it's heartening because we have a lot of good people, a lot of good industries. We are the Southern Arizona Business Coalition, and we work with the mining industry. I'm also on the Power Plant and Line Siting Committee for the Corporation Commission. But water was recently approved by CAP board for a recharge by a mining company. And yet we have our own city failing to utilize and maximize that recharge facility down there. And it's a little frustrating because with they conflating the issue, number one, and we need our water down there as much as we need it up here. And so to your point about reservoirs, what about, since water really does flow from the southeast toward the center of the state, can we do a CAP recharge along the canal someplace, halfway between Phoenix and Tucson or something to, and the other issue I've always noticed when I come back and forth is the evaporation rate. What is the evaporation rate of the CAP water? And is there a way to try to reduce that?
I'll start with evaporation first. It's pretty consistent on CAP canals. We lose about 50 to 60 off of Lake Pleasant every year, 50 to 60,000 acre feet, and we lose about 10 on the canals. So all in all, for about 1.5 million acre feet, not that bad. Of course, you have issues Lake Mead with a lot of evaporation, Lake Powell with a lot of evaporation, but you also are able to harness those big years like 2019 and 2011 and hold that water. So it's really, it's been worth it. As far as recharge, there are a number of recharge areas throughout the state, many of them right by the canal. In Pinal, what they've done, it's very innovative in Arizona, is instead of recharge for most of it, there is some recharge in Pinal. What you do is if you're a city with your water and you want to get say a long-term storage credit, put it underground and get credit, you send it to Pinal farmers and they use it instead of pumping groundwater, and you get a credit for that. So that's where a lot of mitigation water is coming that way, with folks sending their surface water to farmers in Pinal County. They don't pump, and that gets a credit. So we have it both ways. You can actually put your water on top of the ground and let it sink in and get yourself a groundwater credit that way, or you can deliver surface water to someone and they don't pump. So it's been very innovative. It's worked so far.
Shall we, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know, I sit up here as a person with beaten dog syndrome from California, you know. We fight back though. By the way, this is Laura Page, who's her and her husband Mark are fairly new residents of Peoria. I sent you 2 voters, Debbie. She's on my staff up there in Chico, and they had enough of what goes on. And so they're getting involved and already recruiting more good, well, I won't get too political here. Anyway, but it's refreshing to hear what Lisa Atkins was talking about and Brenda here. You're actually trying to positively do things, build things, make things. Here, we're just at home. I mean, we're just trying to defend them from tearing down dams, getting rid of nuclear power plants. Projects we've talked about. Brenda and I have stood on top of Lake Shasta's dam there with the Interior Secretary just a few years ago. There's a proposal that's been talked about for a lot of years to raise the dam about 18 feet and add 600,000 or so acre feet. You know, I mean, did you say a minute ago that the 2 Powell and Meade add up to 50 million? Our 2 biggest dams in California are 8 million combined, which is, you know, pretty big. 50 million, that's incredible. Anyway, we're just trying to keep from going backwards. The senator was talking about forestry there, and I'm working on forestry all the time. The Dixie Fire, you may have heard of, burned just under 1 million acres last year, all in my district, okay? Year after year, 6-digit fire. But you're exactly right on with this whole thing. We've been preaching it for years that a thinned out forest that's healthy, that it's got got the right ratio of trees per acre to be healthy, uses a incredible less amount of water that is then released. You can see it in the rivers and others that the water levels are released. So I guess let me get to a quick question of our two experts up here. Do you have in Arizona the terminology called beneficial use? In California, beneficial use is arbitrated by government to decide are using the water for the best possible benefit. And when I see what's going on with lately right now, there's serious discussions about shifting water rights from long time water rights holders, and because we have to rethink that. We use the terms reimagine water, things like that. And so I think that we'll use the term beneficial use like, well, that agriculture isn't really that important, you know? And so millions of acres of ag are going to be idled in California, millions, by the time they're done. They're going to regulate the groundwater, and they're taking the surface water. And so I think, you know, let's rock and roll here. The world is running out of everything. We have crises internationally. California provides 90% plus of at least a dozen major crops that America uses. 90 to 98% of is grown in our state. Fine, we'll import it. So getting down to it, do you in Arizona have this term called beneficial use where government can decide that what you're doing in agriculture, listen to our ag folks, is not as beneficial as letting water run out the delta under the Golden Gate to try and keep a fish that no longer exists going? Because that's what we're doing. I don't think you all waste water down here. By the time it gets through the 7 states, and then what you're obligated to let go to Mexico, unless they're wasting it, you guys aren't wasting a drop. We're letting 12,000 CFS go out constantly through the delta that isn't being used. We waste so much water that we could be trapping. So do you have that term beneficial use, and how much is environmental water in this state compared to California's 50%?
Let me just, from a state land commissioner's perspective and also watching economic development in the state of Arizona. Arizona makes things. We're a production state. Our economy is totally dependent on harvesting and building things and sending them out. Water is a key component of every part of our economy. So there have been lawsuits, and I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't go there, but we have certain implications from a federal standpoint with Fish and Wildlife Service and dealing with the federal agencies, but we are keenly aware of how we use water in the state. And I'm very proud to say that Arizona uses the same amount of water today with a much larger population than we used in 1957. That is still with the ability, as was mentioned earlier, and I indicated that state land was purchased for the building of TSMC. Making chips is very water dependent. Intel is probably one of the best examples of how water is used in manufacturing in the way that they recycle. So it has been part of our DNA to be able to be prepared. When we weren't taking all of our water off the Colorado River, we then came up with a system to be able to take everything off and put it in the ground for the future. So we've been keenly aware in a desert environment not to waste and to set priorities, and also to be very cognizant that how we use water is a very critical part of our economy because we're an exporting state, a manufacturing and exporting state. Brenda may have a better answer.
At least I think you just did a very good description of how important water is to us and how much we've invested in conservation to get to a point where we're using so much less. But I'll say on the legal side, being a Western water lawyer, I did at one point move to Northern California and start working on the water issues there. And I was slightly appalled, but we have a much different legal system here. We don't have an entity that claims to change the definition or create a definition of beneficial use. We do under Western water law, you must put your water to a beneficial use to hold your right. And so you can't, you have to be able to, you can't just buy water and hold it to speculate. Right. But legally, Arizona has a long history of prior appropriation, showing your right, proving up your right, continuing to use your right, and we'll probably in the future have to look at some more flexibility of how do you move rights around, but we don't have anything like the California board.
That's why Laura moved here. Right. So let's thank both Lisa and Brenda for their excellent presentations. So we'll try to stay somewhat on schedule here. I want to go next to our water and agricultural panel. So everything that we just heard was a perfect segue into our next panel of experts. And I'll introduce all four of them and let them take the program away. First of all, we have Mr. Robert Kogan. He's a senior manager for federal affairs of the Salt River Project. So welcome, Robert. Next, we have Stephanie Smallhouse, no relation that I'm aware, who's the president of the Arizona State Farm Bureau. So welcome to you, Stephanie. We also have Patrick Bray, who's the executive vice president at Arizona Farm and Ranch Group. So welcome to you also, Patrick. And from the American Farm Bureau, we have Ms. Shelby Hagenauer. So Shelby, also looking forward to hearing from you. So Robert, we'll turn it over to you and start this next panel. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. My name is Robert Kogan, Senior Manager of Federal Affairs for Salt River Project, SRP, located just down the road in Tempe. Thank you to the Congressional Western Caucus and Congresswoman Lesko for serving as the honorary host for this discussion this morning. SRP is one of Arizona's largest electric utilities and the largest raw water supplier in the Phoenix metropolitan area, delivering about 750,000 acre feet annually to agriculture and municipal and urban water users. Collectively, SRP provides reliable water and power to more than 2 million people in central Arizona, including Peoria. To tell the full story of SRP, you need to go back more than 100 years when SRP was helping the region thrive and before Arizona had become a state. Today, we operate and maintain 7 dams and reservoirs on the Salt and Verde River systems, as well as 1,300 miles of canals, laterals, ditches, and pipelines for water delivery. Our watershed is north and east of where we're sitting right now, and that area covers 8.3 million acres of land, or roughly 13,000 square miles. The vast majority of our 13,000 square mile watershed lies on protected federal forest lands, much of which is unhealthy and overgrown, as the senator brought up just a few minutes ago. SRP has a number of key partnerships within the state with private industry, with the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, and others to address wildfire prevention through strategic forest thinning activities. I mentioned all of this before Stephanie, Patrick, and Shelby talk agriculture because of the common link between healthy forests and watersheds, which you're all very well familiar with. It's key to securing our water future, ensuring an adequate water supply, and quite literally the lifeblood of all things agriculture. As you all know, there are many issues unique to the West or uniquely Western in how we approach them. Like drought conservation, active forest management to restore the health of our watersheds and our forests, and policies that support water storage and resiliency. These are all issues that you as members of the Congressional Western Caucus have championed over the years. You work to address them each session of Congress, and for that we're thankful. As Brenda mentioned, the West is in its 22nd year of drought, with some predicting that could continue through the decade. We're experiencing greater catastrophic wildfires, oftentimes outside the traditional wildfire season, which poses a threat not only to lives, but to our water supply and our watersheds. So thank you for this opportunity, and I'll look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. So we're supposed to discuss water and agriculture in 5 minutes, so I'm going to do the best that I can. First of all, I'd like to say that it's an honor to be in this roundtable with members of Congress, with fellow primary industry folks. Without agriculture and mining, you can't do anything else. So I'm so happy to do that. And 2 tough commissioners. the type that have a great appreciation for agriculture, but also sometimes make you do things that you don't want to do to get things done. And so I appreciate that. When you were commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, we were working on the drought contingency plan, and sometimes we needed a little bit of tough love, and we got that to get the job done. And of course, Commissioner Atkins is a strong partner working with ranchers and helping to manage state land. So my comments, I just wanted to kind of bring two questions to the roundtable. The first question is, why are farmers losing their water, specifically in Arizona and across the West? And I'm going to broaden the conversation a little bit broader than just drought. And then the second question is, whose problem is that? So the first question, why? So you can basically boil any issue down to climate, courts, and cost. So the climate issue with the drought, there's not much we can do about that. We go through cycles of drought in Arizona and the West. This one is particularly painful, and we don't know when it's going to end. On the court side, agriculture farmers are losing in the courts. We're losing to endangered species, as folks in California and Washington well know. We're losing in water rights fights when determining whether water is surface flow or groundwater, and some other issues. And agriculture, at least in Arizona, has often been used as the currency to settle disputes between sovereign nations and the federal government. And so we are often losing in the courts there. And then on the cost, water's getting more expensive, at least for agriculture. Infrastructure is expensive to maintain and build. And because of that, over the years, farmers across, I don't know so much about the rest of the West, but certainly in Arizona, have at times negotiated away their priority so that they can just afford the water that they need to farm. And so that's one of those situations where it is what it is, and we have respect for the priority system, but that doesn't make it any less painful. So the second question is, whose problem is that? Whose problem is it to solve? So of course the farmer is the most directly impacted, and we've already talked a little bit about the loss there, so I'm not going to go into those details, but their livelihood cut of 40% of their income. And not just that farmer, right? So it has a ripple effect. So you're not only impacting the farmers directly, but what about the other farmers? Dairy and livestock is a huge industry in Arizona. We need the alfalfa from those farmers in Pinal County for our businesses. And then what about the consumer? Unfortunately, I don't really think the consumer has really engaged at all on this issue and has connected the dots between water and agriculture. And I really don't think that they will for a generation. And by that time, it's going to be much more difficult to fix the problem. When you're looking at food affordability, food access, and local resiliency in the Western states. What about the state? What role does the state have? Is this a problem for the state? Well, $23.3 billion of the economy is attributed to agriculture in Arizona. 60% of the land area in Arizona is used for agriculture, and that's pretty similar for all Western states. It's a little over 50%, give or take. Local food production is important for resiliency, and frankly, just quality of life. People like to live in places that produce things and produce food, and like to know that food is produced in their backyards. What about the feds? Is it their problem? Do they have a role in solving this problem? I would say yes, because of the obvious issue of national security. If you can't feed yourself, then you can't defend yourself. So a third of the agricultural supply in this country comes from the Western region. That's pretty important, and I don't think we very often get credit for that. Particularly in the Southwest, we're very good at turning sunshine into food. And we obviously don't want to start filling the void with more imports from Mexico and Canada and South America, which is where they will most likely come from. And the West is also slightly starting to outpace the South as being the fastest growing area of the country. So out of all those folks that I believe, share in this issue, what can we do about it, and what are we doing about it? And you've heard a lot of the solutions already today in terms of the state working very hard on this issue, and we're very appreciative of that. But I can tell you that for the last 40 to 50 years, farmers have been diligently practicing best management practices, have been spending thousands, sometimes millions of dollars on conservation practices. You heard about some new technology that we're investigating. New technology can be difficult because it's expensive and it has to pay for itself. Looking at new crops. So the farmer has been working diligently. On the consumer side, we need some help there. We need some help with the consumer engagement and education. Cooperative extension can play a role, and I can tell you the Arizona Farm Bureau works diligently to educate consumers about the connection of water and agriculture. But I think that municipalities could play a stronger role in educating the consumer. And just because I don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. But when these farmers fallow 40% of their fields this year, I don't know necessarily of many restrictions that are going to go in place for residential housing. So that obviously would make a connection directly to the consumer of what's happening on the farms. The state went through the drought contingency plan mitigation, very forward thinking, very tough. We have a drought mitigation fund established legislatively last year. The Arizona Water Authority, Commissioner Atkins mentioned that, the $1 billion investment. And with this, I find it encouraging because I think before we do any more regulation of agriculture, we need to do augmentation, because agriculture has given as much as they can give. I think we're at a point where your yields start to go down because the plant just needs the amount of water that you're giving it. And we've conserved ourselves into a certain situation. So I'm encouraged that the state is looking at augmentation and investment. And then on the federal side, I'm actually going to cut my comments short here out of respect for the other members of the roundtable. And I know that Shelby's going to cover the infrastructure investment, but that's a positive thing, that I think the federal government is making a major investment in Western water infrastructure. And I know Shelby's going to go into that, but I did want to close up my comments with a comment on the kind of related to the natural infrastructure conversation that we've been having. I think this is a very good opportunity for everyone involved, the farmers, the consumers, the state agencies and governments, and the feds, to really hit home this issue of natural infrastructure and the fact that out here in the West, we're highly dependent on public lands. We're highly dependent on being able to manage those public lands. Ranchers play an important part of collecting that water. And we need to have a good working relationship with those federal agencies, and it is quite challenging a lot of the time. So I would just say, as far as this roundtable, the Western Caucus serving as a champion for agriculture in the West and water use, whether you're from the West or from Pennsylvania or Missouri or wherever, our food goes all over the country. And it's really more than just an Arizona issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you to the chairman and Ms. Lesko for inviting me out today. Great to be a part of this good roundtable. And I'm just going to piggyback off a little bit of Ms. Smallhouse's comments, because she was spot on. And I think if you talk about the history of SRP and CAP and water settlements and all of that, she's absolutely right. Agriculture has given and given and given all the way through there. And sometimes, we know that, we did it for the good of the state. A lot of those guys in the SRP, bonded and put their land up as collateral to get that done. We did the same thing in Pinal County in a different manner to build that infrastructure there so that we could get our CAP water and it wasn't just left on the river. So from the farming perspective, we're willing to always be a part of the solution, but it feels like, we continue to be on the losing end of the deals. We understand that DCP needed to happen for the betterment of the lower Colorado states, and we were a part of that solution. But you look across that board now from that decision, and we were the ones that got less water, and we got a bill, and that bill was to build more infrastructure. And then we had to go fight for that money to build that infrastructure. And really, because of the COVID dollars, we were able to finally put an end to that, and they have the money to go do that. So I couldn't agree more with Stephanie, but from the agriculture perspective, we think we've given quite a bit in this water discussion, and we got to start figuring out a little bit more fairness across the board when dealing with this, and also realize that drought contingency plans and the climate stuff, that we should not be making long-term policy decisions based on short-term droughts. And you can call, how long have we been in a 100-year drought? I think maybe 200 years, right? Every time we have a drought, it's a 100-year drought that we're in. That aside, I want to shift a little bit to the Forest Service, public lands in general, because we are a heavy public land state. And I appreciate, our partners like SRP and others that are up there trying to, do what they can to thin and put the forest back in place. But when you look at those projects, they're so minuscule. It's like, are they really even doing anything? And so aside from, changing NEPA, streamlining that, getting ESA kind of out of the way and recognizing that we are going to make mistakes out there, but that's okay. We have technology to fix that kind of stuff right away. And we have better technology to go in and thin and manage those forests until we can overcome that as a whole and get projects really moving in the forest. The only tool left to manage the forage out there is grazing. And in Arizona specifically, the board feet that we cut is nothing. Nothing. I mean, it just is. It doesn't even put a dent in the problem that we have out there. So the only tool that the federal government has left is grazing on those federal lands, and we're constantly under attack. But there is one thing that I think that moving forward that I wanted to put in front of all of you, especially as we start to look at the Farm Bill. There's one thing, and probably the only thing the Forest Service has done right in my career, but it's they took the BEAR program, which is the team that goes in right after wildfires and they mop up the mess that they created. But that's a side note. So they mop up the mess, right? And they're focused on making sure to protect from landslides and all of that. They put a second program in place that goes in and evaluates the ranching infrastructure that's lost. And they put a number on that, and they send it back to DC. It goes through the channels, and they say, okay, here's what we got to put the infrastructure in place. The Tonto National Forest, I know, has used it. Coronado has used it. And I think it's based right now in Region 3, which is down here in Arizona, New Mexico. It has been working well. It needs a few tweaks. But at the end of the day, here's the thing why I tout that we need to do something there is that if we don't get that tool back out on the land managing the forage, we're just continuing to be put in the same cycle that we're in. We then can't get cattle out there. Those permits are either abandoned or they're running far less cattle than they can sustain. And then those fuels are coming back and we're just in this cycle. Every 10 years, I think we have a pretty mega wildfire along the lines of a wallow fire, that type of stuff. The Telegraph fire this year was pretty damaging, especially for the city of Globe in that area. But it's just an endless cycle. So anything that we can do to put the tools that we are using back out on the landscape as soon as possible, fires is the best solution. And they actually have a program that's working that I think needs to be expanded, in the Farm Bill. And really, at the end of the day, the money used for those infrastructures needs to come from that open fire checkbook. Quit balancing the Forest Service's budget on that and put it to use where it needs to be. But those are my comments. I'm sure Shelby has some stuff on infrastructure, which is far important too. So I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. And thank you, Chairman Newhouse and Representative Lesko and others. It's a real pleasure to be here on behalf of the American Farm Bureau Federation. President Smallhouse is an amazing representative of the Arizona farmers, working with us all the time. And I'm pleased. I'm staying here Monday and Tuesday to do some farm tours to really get some on the ground visits, which I'm looking forward to. And it's always fun to be with my former boss, Brenda. So it's good to be back here again. And I always learn something when I hear smart people talk about water and agriculture in the West. And I thought, since President Smallhouse focused on Arizona, I talk a little bit about the big picture Western agriculture. We have smart economists at the American Farm Bureau Federation. We're not all just lobbyists, and we take advantage of their ability to dig into numbers and what does USDA share with us, and how can we really get at impacts. But sometimes those numbers lag, which happens. So last summer, like May, when we started realizing it was going to be a really bad year for water in the West, we started getting calls and questions from major news publications like Evening News. What is the impact to farmers and ranchers because of this drought? What will it be? And then what might be the impact on the consumer? So we decided that we were going to put together a member survey. So we sent out a survey to all of our members across the 10 Western states. And in Farm Bureau, that's kind of it's the 10 Western states. At reclamation, it's 17. So I'm happy to get adjusted to that still. But it really provided us the opportunity to hear from folks on the ground at our state farm bureaus, at our county farm bureaus. As you know, we represent 6 million grassroots members who belong to their county farm bureaus, who belong to their state farm bureaus, and we're all connected together that way. And so we put out this survey in June, and then we did it again in October to see if anything had changed. And we focused on three areas. So farm level operational changes. You know, this drought is coming, or this drought is here. What have you done, or what are you planning on doing in your area that's going to impact the operations on your farm? We looked at water deliveries. Are you getting reduced surface water deliveries? Are you having to focus more on groundwater usage? And then also on rangeland and the impacts there on rangeland from the drought. And we got back comments from all across the West. And the most significant one was really related to the cost of local feed. So local feed costs for animals was the most significant impact that our members reported to us. And you could hear that and why. I mean, Stephanie talked about that. Other things we found, not surprisingly, surface water deliveries were down, groundwater usage was up. And then related to local feed costs, we also had a lot of folks who were moving animals from the range early, both private and public, because the forage just wasn't there. It hadn't rained when we needed it to rain. And so you kind of ran out of food for the animals. So we're going to continue to look at these member reported impacts, because it lets us know things like, are people ripping up orchards because they don't see, and California is a big state for that, because they just don't see the availability of water in the future. We appreciated very much Congress's support. Last fall's continuing resolution had $10 billion for disaster assistance. And that was for more than just the drought, but we appreciated the inclusion of these impacts to farmers and ranchers across the West. And speaking of money, infrastructure bill, that is a big deal when you look at reclamation. Brenda and I both know it's not the biggest in budgets of federal agencies, but Congress is pretty generous, providing $8.3 billion. That's almost doubling the Bureau's budget for the next 5 years, which is a huge deal. And $3.2 billion of that is supposed to go to aging infrastructure, which is very important. A lot of that infrastructure, whether the reclamation owns it and operates it, whether reclamation owns it and it's run by a local irrigation district and partner, some of it's 80 years old, 100 years old. There were a couple of very high profile pipeline or canal collapses kind of in the West. And you just have to focus on infrastructure. You can't assume it's going to last forever. And so that $3 billion for aging infrastructure, if invested well and wisely, and it sounds like they're actively working, the individual regions within reclamation are talking to their local irrigation districts on, what do we need to be doing? And so that's a positive development, working together collaboratively on that local level, so that decisions are made where we know things need to be done. There was also a whole bunch of extra money dumped into the Water Smart program, which reclamation doesn't do grant programs other than Water Smart, and that's mostly for water conservation. And that's primarily for irrigation districts, which, our members belong to irrigation districts, serve on irrigation district boards, and oftentimes are big parts of it. But also the NRCS conservation programs can work hand in hand. And so it's been nice to see federal agencies and two different agencies work collaboratively to say, if we're going to do some NRCS conservation programs on farm, where can we pair that up with work being done off farm with an irrigation district? To try to continue focusing, farmers and ranchers are big into conservation and very interested in new technologies. And these are opportunities to engage as we move forward. So I do think that infrastructure bill is going to have a positive impact on Western water infrastructure in a way that there just hasn't been that investment in a very long time. I should also just echo, I wasn't planning on talking about forest management or grazing, but my job is the Western job, as they call it. And so we are very focused on policies supporting grazing that reduces fuels. It's a very positive economic factor too here in the West. Forest fuels reduction. We have lots of foresters in addition to farmers and ranchers as part of our organization. So the ability to get in there, do thinning, reduce those fuels, and also at the back end, come in and kind of clean up afterwards is really key. So we continue to support ESA, modernization, NEPA modernization. Those are other key programs we support. And as Mr. Newhouse knows, we support dams. We like them. Dams are important for both irrigation, but also up in the Pacific Northwest, navigation. We have a huge number of our producers up in that area who move their products down through the Snake River out the Columbia. And so thanks for letting us join you here in Arizona to focus more on this area.
Great. Thank you all for great comments. I appreciate very much, being a farmer, I myself, I truly appreciate your comments as far as the efforts that are being made on the behalf of farmers and the efforts farmers are making themselves. And I know we're running over time, and so, but that's what happens when we're talking about important stuff. A couple of you made some comments about some of the things that our agricultural industry is doing to respond to the crisis. And I don't mean to throw gas on maybe a fire that could be burning out there, but I think I heard you say that, and this maybe is my interpretation, that maybe our urban and suburban cousins aren't doing quite as much as they could be doing. So could you expound on that a little bit? We're big water users in agriculture, absolutely, and so that's where everybody sees the changes need to be made. But what more could we be as Congress, perhaps, or encouraging as government, urban areas to do more of when it comes to water usage, reusage, conservation, those kind of things?
Are we still? Yeah, that's kind of an inflammatory question. Well, I think the fact is one, I will say that, as Ms. Berman mentioned, that municipalities have stepped up during the mitigation to basically, instead of storing water underground and getting more credit for that, frankly, they're sending some of that water to the farms. And so it's a different kind of credit, but they still get credit. But the mitigation package, it's never enough if you're a farmer and you have a dry field in front of you and you can't plant it, it's heartbreaking. And we have air quality issues in Arizona. So it's never enough to make everyone whole, but I will give them credit there. Now, where I will criticize, though, is that it's also never too late to start conserving water. Like I said, farmers have been doing this for 40 to 50 years in the central Arizona area. And, with a lot of help from CAP, from NRCS, from different programs. But it's never too late to start conserving water. So, those cities might not be in a tier 2 or a tier 3 shortage. But my question is, and again, just because I don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. But my question is, why aren't there already water restrictions happening in Phoenix and Tucson and the bigger cities? If farmers are not planting fields that are absolutely necessary with crops that we all need, why aren't people under water restrictions in the city? And honestly, I don't think that's the federal government's job probably to come in and make that happen. I think it's a state issue and a local government issue. But I guess that would be my message to local governments is that, we're feeling the pain. It's never too late to start conserving. So maybe the consumer would better understand the pain that the farmer is feeling if they can't water their grass on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So.
To follow up just briefly on that, Stephanie's completely right, and it's not necessarily a federal issue. I think on the federal level, the big discussion will be between the upper and lower basins of the Colorado, and how do we deal with that, and how do we make sure it's fair and equitable. Internally in the state, I think we have done a wonderful job in managing our water collective. I mean, we have 100-year water assurance for building homes. That's the highest in the Western United States. It's kind of it's hard to even wrap your head around. We don't plan food for 100 years. We don't say, hey, we're going to get our vegetables from Yuma for the next 100 years. And what do we do to make sure that happens? And so it's kind of a different, it's hard to imagine. So when we start divvying out the water and the users, we have AMAs and all of that in place but when we go back to DCP again, we know that we had to do it, but it has kind of led to some other things where municipalities and maybe some of the industrial commercial users, what kind of restrictions and what kind of conservation are they doing? I mean, incentivizing technology really is probably the best way for the farmers here in this state, whatever it is, if it's NDRIP or some other technology, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck at the end of the day. And we're all about it. I mean, we're definitely open to it. The problem with technology, right, is it always starts very expensive, and then as we refine it, it's a few years before it's actually affordable for most farmers, and that's where then maybe the government can step in. I hate to say it, but subsidize that technology so that we with the most bang for our buck. I think that disconnect from the people that live in the municipalities and where their food is grown, that's the problem. They don't see that. The stories are how much, this huge number that we use. And I don't remember the number offhand, but all that number goes back into the economy, whether it's feeding somebody directly or indirectly, going to the dairies, producing milk, or trying to upgrade our protein from alfalfa to a steak. That is never calculated in that number. And so really on the city side, it goes back to technology too as well, and reusing their water, more water treatment facilities, we're using effluent, all of that. So there's a lot of ground to be made there. But again, it goes back to, I think, the agriculture community is done with being the target, and we need other people to share in the pain.
Thank you.
All right. I'll come back with a counter to that and then counter myself. And I'll talk about California, which I don't know is ever a good example, but we've been through that. And the urban areas, I'll say, as an ag person, that they are stepping up pretty good on conserving water. I mean, the age-old thing in California is north versus south. Northern California complains that Southern Cal's taking all our water. There's some element of that, but really it comes down to people versus environment. And the LA Times likes to write, well, ag uses 80% of the water in California. 80% of the amount people use. But if you take the whole picture, it's 50 environment, 40 ag, not 80, and then 10% urban. Okay. And, health and safety, whatever. So we have a battle. You talked about NEPA reform in California. We have a version called CEQA. And then there's the ESA in general. The fish have the best lawyers, but the NEPA and CEQA and the ESA, it's as if they are inside the lost ark that Indiana Jones. They are sacred. You cannot touch them. I've been through it in California with the CEQA, and at the federal level, you can't hardly touch this stuff. So under this administration, we're going to do our damnedest on all this stuff, but they're not going to yield a lot. And so if I had an evil twin, okay, that evil twin would say, let's go ahead and run this sucker out of water completely. Because then people, you're talking about the public that needs to be educated. Oh, water, that isn't connected to ag, comes from the store. Then they'll learn where stuff comes from. And they're not learning yet because they're still voting in people that are taking the water and not managing our trees and don't want to mine minerals. They want it all to come from China or Afghanistan. So our education needs to reach deep. So my evil twin said you could figure it out real fast. We'll top it off here. 2 nights ago was the day after the president's speech. I was walking home, and there's a bunch of trucks and trains and stuff picking up all the barriers around the Capitol. We have a fence and the concrete K-rail all around it there, because where Joe Biden goes to make a speech, they have to have a fortress. So I talked to one old boy there. It was one of the flatbed trucks. And he said, so Matt, what are you doing? Oh, we're picking this stuff back up. I should be retired. I'm 69 years old, but I have a couple rental houses we were going to make our living off of, but the state of Virginia says I have to let them go rent free for COVID, and I don't get to make it back. So I'm out here doing this. So what do you think all these truckers are going to be coming to DC? He said, well, that's nice, but if they really wanted to get people's attention, they would quit delivering stuff for about 2 weeks. Quit delivering stuff to the retail level for 2 weeks. And that will get people's attention. That's a fake shortage. We're going to have real shortages if we're not. I'm trying to grow my 2022 crop that people are going to eat in 2023 right now. Now, if they take all my water away, are we going to get it from Ukraine? Are we going to get it from China? Rice, wheat, all this? We're not going to get it from anywhere. And they're going to have us over a barrel like we've never seen before. So my evil twin is, talking a little more about this stuff nowadays with like, if you want to rock and roll, you just keep this up because, as a real life farmer on this, we're seeing firsthand what this supply chain and how bad government regulations are indeed going to hurt. Boris Yeltsin, I could go, but Boris Yeltsin came here some years ago. I think with H.W. Bush, and they went to a store, and he was blown away by the amazing bounty, the plentifulness of it, and how people can find anything they want, and they don't hoard it. They just go get a few things, they leave. I think he was moved to tears by that. We're going to become like a third world country if we don't figure it out. And that's why everybody on this panel, this is why I do this stuff, is that we got to get it right because we're going to be way screwed real soon. And that's what I told the president the other night after the State of the Union. I got a minute with him. I told him, sir, if I could leave you with this, our farms are dying. We have to get them water. He said, I'll call you.
You'll have to let me know when he calls you. I see if he follows through on that promise. I don't know. All right, so our next panel is exciting. It's on energy and mining. And we know now with the Russian war on Ukraine how very important this is. I hope the American people are starting to wake up. And I hope that the word is getting out there that the United States buys, in November, it was 585,000 barrels a day of Russian oil. And so we are sending Russia each and every day, let's say 58, it ranges from 40 to $75 million a day so that they can go and massacre the Ukrainian people. Absolutely ridiculous. At the same time, Biden has this war on oil and gas and on mining and on the pipelines. And so this next panel is going to tell us all about it. And so I want to introduce Steve Trussell. Steve is the executive director with the Arizona Mining Association and the Arizona Rock Products Association. I've known Steve for many years, a great guy. Paul Goranson. He is the Chief Executive Officer and Director of Encore Energy. Welcome, Paul. Andrew Lai, Project Director, Rio Tinto, Resolution Copper Mine, one of those mines that Biden is trying to stop. And so he's right here, Andrew. And Matthew Laguarre, Manager, Public Affairs with Southwest Gas. And Biden has this war on natural gas. I have no idea why. So take it away. I think first we're going to hear from Steve.
Good. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lesko, so good to see you. Steve Trussell, Arizona Mining, Arizona Rock Products, and I am grateful to be here. It's a timely topic. I'm going to echo something Ms. Smallhouse said. She's just a wonderful advocate on Western issues, and we're glad to call you a friend and ally. But if it can't be grown, it must be mined. I look around this building and I think about that, and there aren't too many things that aren't rock or plant-based. And I'm also reminded when I look up at that beautiful copper star on our state flag that we are a mining state. We're the copper state. We're the #1 producer currently of non-fuel minerals in the United States. And I think it's really important to understand the principal minerals. Obviously, are copper, molybdenum, which is used to harden steel and for lubricants, construction aggregates, and which are sand and gravel. Quintessential importance to our infrastructure here. Arizona has a tremendous mineral endowment. 72% of the nation's copper, I'm sorry, let me correct myself, 74 now percent of the nation's copper comes from our great state. We are 3rd in the nation in construction aggregate production and 4th in the world in production of copper after Chile, Peru, and China. And did I mention it was China? Rock products and aggregates have a $5.9 billion economic impact, direct and indirect. The hard rock sector is a $14.2 billion impact, and our total mining impact in the state of Arizona is $20.1 billion. Arizona also is fortunate to have rare earth minerals, which we're looking at developing currently, along with lithium, zinc, silver, gold, potash, and helium. Arizona is ranked the second best jurisdiction for mining in the world. So that's compared to other provinces, states, and countries. And that's according to the Fraser Institute. And that said, it still takes, even here in a favorable jurisdiction, 10 to 12 years to permit a mine. So if you think about things that we're trying to get online, it's going to take a while. And so we're behind in the race. Here's a little fun fact. So I think about this little device that we all rely on and freak out when we can't find it. And I think about that. And if you look at the periodic table, which has 118 elements, 72 of them are used for the development of this phone, but many of them are not sourced here or mined here. There are now, as of February 22nd, there were 35 critical minerals. We're now up to 50. And those are minerals that are deemed essential for national security, economic development, and the like. Everything we love, from our national defense to all the conveniences and the quality of life products that we enjoy. To put that into perspective, China currently controls the production of 80% of rare earth elements, 70% of graphite, 59% of lithium, and 36% of cobalt. What will be the result of the impending issues with Russia, China, and the Middle East? And we saw what happened in Afghanistan, but they had a huge mineral endowment as well. So can't help but wonder or ponder the thought, what is that going to do? What impact is it going to have on supply chain and so forth, depending on what happens? And also, to put things into perspective, in 2021, of the 142 lithium battery manufacturing plants, 107 of those were built or developed in China, only 9 in the US. A recent poll indicated that 87% of American people believe that our mineral supply chain should be sourced from US mines. That's due to the attention, I'm guessing, to our focus on safety and the environment, as opposed to other places in the world. And I'm not talking about responsible companies. I'm talking about, countries that source their own minerals. By 2050, we will see an increase of population of about 1.8 billion and a 200% increase in the demand for copper and a 450% increase in the demand for graphite, lithium, and cobalt. These are battery metals, by the way. I'm sure you were aware. But renewable energy starts with mining. And one of the things that I loved that Stephanie said is we currently convert sunshine into food, but we don't convert it into food, but we do convert sunshine into power, or we help with that process. So anyway, electric vehicles use 4 times more copper than conventional automobiles. And EVs and that car field, that demand is growing exponentially. Solar panels contain about 5.5 tons of copper per megawatt. And the U.S. is currently leading the world in wind energy production, but there's a lack of copper, and it may thwart the industry's expansion efforts. A single wind farm requires between 4 and 15 million pounds of copper. So current and future challenges include, but are not limited to, supply chain, land access, need for science-based regulations, workforce development, a lack of manufacturing and domestic production of these critical materials. And then there's the ever-present issue of federal administration alignment with their own policies and directives, lack of a durable definition of the waters of the U.S., weaponization of the ESA, as you heard from Ms. Smallhouse, and land conservation executive orders that we have some major concerns with, especially when Arizona, I believe, leads the nation in some of these efforts. And as you know, based on this map that was provided by the state land commissioner, we know what a large portion of the lands are federal. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that with common sense reforms, Mr. Chairman, Arizona and the U.S. Can deliver renewable energy minerals, assist in supply chain issues, and create high-paying jobs. but that's going to take embracing efficient permitting processes. It's going to take ensuring fiscal policies that encourage investment, recognizing the role of federal lands in reducing import reliance, and finally acknowledging that made in America means mined in America.
Well, thank you, Chairman Newhouse, Representative Lusko, for having me here. I appreciate it very much, this opportunity. I'm going to talk about another foreign country, but it's not one that's called China. It's in the headlines today. I want to talk about the critical role the uranium industry plays in America's energy and national security. Arizona holds a tremendous endowment of uranium, and the timing and location of where we're talking today is key, particularly what's going on in Ukraine with Russia's invasion, and it spotlights America's over-dependence on Russia for energy and especially uranium. Encore is a uranium developer. We have properties that cover private, state, and federal lands in Arizona, Texas, and the Mountain West. And I've worked in the industry for over 35 years, so I've seen a few things that I didn't want to see. The Department of Commerce conducted an exhaustive investigation of foreign uranium imports under Section 232 of the Trade Act. In 2019, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross concluded, the present quantities and circumstances of uranium imports are weakening our internal economy and threatening to impair our national security. Since that investigation, the U.S. has increased its dependence to 100% on imported uranium, half of which comes from state-owned companies located in Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. Imports from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan must transit the port of St. Petersburg, Russia, and the Kremlin exerts tremendous influence over the uranium operations in those countries. In fact, Rosatom, the Russian state atomic company, is an extension of the direct extension of the Kremlin, and it is the military and civilian nuclear agency for Russia. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, unrest in Kazakhstan, and upheaval in the world's energy economy, our dependence on those countries for uranium hinders our ability to absorb any disruptions in the nuclear fuel supply chain. This overdependence on the Kremlin has forced U.S. nuclear utilities to seek relief from Russian sanctions to assure their supply of fuel. Our overdependence on Russia is not an accident. Russia has cultivated this dependence. It has given it to give it leverage, and especially now that it faces Western sanctions. Congress has considered measures to preserve the existing nuclear fleet, including a $6 billion reactor credit program and a bipartisan infrastructure bill law, and potential tax credits for nuclear power generation. The Department of Energy has invested billions to develop advanced nuclear technology that we need for our future, but all this is seriously undermined by our dependence on Russia for nuclear fuel. As this geopolitical crisis in Ukraine continues to unfold, America must get serious about the vulnerability of our nuclear fuel supply chain. In its 2020 report, the Federal Nuclear Fuel Working Group stated, America's broad strategy on energy dominance has a gaping vulnerability: Russia. A nation has weaponized its energy supply as an instrument of coercion and dominates nuclear markets. It's not a coincidence that Russia is targeting the U.S. We have the largest fleet of nuclear power plants in the world, and we're the largest consumer of uranium in the world. And also, we have one of the robust national defense programs for our nuclear deterrence and our nuclear navy. The time is now. We must rebuild the domestic nuclear fuel industry. Nuclear energy currently powers 1 in 5 homes in the U.S., and it is our single source of carbon-free energy, but the fleet is aging. We have advanced nuclear technologies that are needed to preserve our fleet and expand it to meet our energy needs well into the future. Unfortunately, at this moment, there's only one current source of advanced reactor fuel. That's what we call high-assay, low-enriched uranium. This may not come as a surprise, but it's Russia. Small modular reactors planned to come online in the next few years have to rely on this type of fuel. And unless the Department of Energy comes up with a solution, we're forced to look to Russia. There is some solutions they could be working on, but they will be costly and logistically challenging. This is a symptom of a much larger problem where the U.S. has completely neglected its nuclear fuel cycle. In the U.S. uranium industry, we have some of the highest environmental, health, and safety standards in the world. We can meet these standards and still be competitive. But the current process could be improved significantly. The regulatory uncertainty has manifested itself in long permitting and licensing timelines have delayed production startups far beyond favorable market conditions, and this has allowed countries like Russia that have no standards or restrictions that we do to undercut U.S. uranium producers, grab market share, and price American uranium out of business. We're not competing against all the free market companies globally. We're competing with governments such as the one in Russia. Sorry, I'm using that word a lot, but it's real. I can only hope that Russians' aggressions we're seeing today in the headlines leads to greater awareness of our nuclear fuel cycle vulnerabilities before it's too late. Congress has appropriated funds to create a strategic uranium reserve that was recommended by the Federal Interagency Nuclear Fuel Working Group. This reserve is intended to guard against the exact supply chain risks that we're seeing as a result of what's happening in the headlines today. The DOE needs to start buying uranium now to stand up the reserve and restart the domestic uranium industry. Much of it still remains idle. Congress needs to appropriate the full $150 million annually for the 10-year program, which is the minimum recommended by the Nuclear Fuel Working Group to restart and rebuild the domestic uranium fuel cycle. Today, right now, they're in the U.S. Senate. Senators Manchin and Murkowski have introduced legislation to ban energy imports from Russia, focusing on oil and gas and coal. But Congress cannot forget that uranium is an important import that needs to be considered as well, whether it's a ban or something else that should limit our dependency on Russia, or at least incentivize domestic sources of uranium. I want to thank you again for your time and the opportunity to present, and I look forward to any questions if we have time.
Good morning. Like Congresswoman Lesko said, my name is Matt Ligori. I'm the Manager of Public Affairs for Southwest Gas. Chairman Newhouse, Representative Lesko, Representative LaMalfa, it's great to be with you. It's great to be with all the industry representatives, Senator Gray. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our newest elected official here in the room, Goodyear Councilman Patrick Bray. So like I said, Matt Ligori, Manager of Public Affairs for Southwest Gas. For background, Southwest Gas serves 2.1 million customers in Arizona, California, and Nevada. We are the largest local distribution utility in Nevada and Arizona. And just for reference, we serve all of Congresswoman Lesko's district and actually serve up in Congressman LaMalfa's neck of the woods in Placer and Nevada County, in South Lake Tahoe, Truckee, and then unincorporated county in that area. Southwest Gas is proud of the role that we play in delivering the promise of natural gas to Arizona's residents and businesses. Our thousands of miles of safe and reliable underground infrastructure and our LNG storage facility in Pima County contributes to the energy resilience of our state. We help power our economy, serving small businesses as well as Arizona's major job creators and economic development locates like Lucid Motors, Intel, TSMC, as was referenced earlier, and Raytheon, and several others. We're proud of the role that we play in keeping household energy bills low by providing our residential customers with a fuel that is 67% less expensive on an energy equivalent basis when compared to electricity, which leads to savings of upwards of $900 a year for families. Lastly, our service is extremely clean and efficient. In Arizona, emissions from using gas in the residential and commercial sector represents less than 4% of Arizona's carbon dioxide emissions. And we are getting even cleaner by embracing clean fuels like renewable natural gas, which is a fuel produced from waste methane emissions at places like wastewater treatment plants, landfills, and dairies. And we're also very interested in incorporating green hydrogen onto our system, and are currently investigating how much hydrogen we can blend on our existing natural gas system, presently with Arizona State University at our facility in Tempe. And we're doing a similar test in Las Vegas, partnering with UNLV there. So to touch on the natural gas industry kind of more generally at a national level, American innovation, the shale gas revolution, and the advancement in exploration technology has led to record supplies of natural gas in the United States. The American Gas Association estimates that we have 3,368 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in the United States, which is enough to power our country for the next 100 years. This amount of gas that we have in the United States has led to significant cost decreases for consumers. I touched on the savings that we're really proud of with our service. It's associated with our service, and really that energy savings is based on the amount of gas that we have in the United States and the amount of supply. Natural gas domestically has allowed electric utilities to reduce their carbon emissions by phasing out coal economically and moving to natural gas-fired electricity. And natural gas also allows for the further deployment of renewables by having that quick ramping ability that natural gas provides to provide electricity when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. And then last but not least, it was touched on earlier by one of my panel members that having the amount of natural gas that we have here in the United States, it reduces the amount of energy overall that we have to import from foreign actors, especially hostile foreign actors. This couldn't be more topical than right now with what we're seeing in the Ukraine with the Russian invasion. For reference, Germany imports 63.7% of their energy, while the United States reached net exporter status under the Trump administration. So we talked, on earlier panels and presenters about, some of the issues they're facing, especially, drought and water scarcity. Really our industry, our problems, and Congresswoman Lesko touched on it a little bit. Our problems are related to the government, and we're seeing challenges at all levels of government. At the local government level, there's been a movement that started in Berkeley, California, where that city banned natural gas in new buildings. I'm a former Bay Area resident myself. That's where I'm from, and so when we saw that happen, I wasn't all that concerned. Berkeley's done a lot of crazy things in my lifetime, but that movement has quickly spread to places like New York City, Seattle, and several other Bay Area municipalities. At the state level, legislation has been introduced in places like Nevada and Washington, Chairman Newhouse, your home state, to ban natural gas statewide in new buildings. So the movement has morphed from the city level to the state level, and just want to give a quick shout out to Senator Gray, who we worked closely with the leadership team in the Senate and in the House to make sure that movement could not take hold here in Arizona. And Governor Ducey signed that bipartisan piece of law into law, or bipartisan legislation into law, and prevented cities, counties, and cities and counties from banning natural gas in new buildings, which is great for Arizona consumers. And then just lastly, at the federal level, the challenges that we're facing, they're kind of varied, right? A few years ago, Democrats tried to use the pipeline safety reauthorization process, which is usually a very bipartisan process to reauthorize PHMSA, to really look at pipeline safety. They tried to hijack that process to incorporate methane emissions regulation into that process. As everyone around this table knows, when the Biden administration took office, they put a pause on drilling on federal lands, which was obviously detrimental to the industry. Just this last year, the Build Back Better package included a couple policies that were detrimental for our industry. One being a methane tax that would have been applied to natural gas emissions upstream. But of course, if midstream and producers have taxes applied on them, those get passed down to distribution companies like Southwest Gas, which ultimately would be borne by our consumers. The American Gas Association estimated that policy, which obviously passed the House, stalled in the Senate, if it were enacted, it would have increased consumers' gas costs on a residential basis by $200 to $300 a year. So a really, massive hit. Additionally, in the Build Back Better package, there was a $9 billion appropriation to pay for customers, or not customers, citizens to convert their appliances from natural gas appliances to electric appliances, really picking up on this natural gas ban movement that we're seeing at the local level. And then just last but not least, just recently, just 2 weeks ago, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, implemented 2 new policy statements on a 3-2 partisan basis that moves the agency away from siting pipelines based on market-based need and moves the agency towards requiring projects to have, I should say, the approval process to consider several non-market-based criteria when approving pipeline projects that include greenhouse gas emissions and environmental justice issues. These new policy statements have earned rebuke from the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Chairman, Senator Joe Manchin, who called the policy changes reckless, and from Republican FERC Commissioners Christie and Danley, who called them radical and practically unworkable, respectively. And for us here in Arizona, we are not a natural gas producing state. So as a distribution company, we are getting our gas from Kinder Morgan and Transwestern from Texas and the Four Corners area, respectively. And so for us, this FERC policy statement is very concerning because, you know, as we continue to land this great economic development, the Lucids, the TSMCs, Intel announcing their $20 billion investment to expand their operations in Chandler, that even earned a shout out from the president at the State of the Union. You know, we can't facilitate that growth if we can't get the gas that we need from Texas and from the Four Corners area. So a lot of concerning things going on at the government level related to the natural gas industry. But, you know, really appreciate the Western Caucus's support on a lot of these issues. And I'm happy to stand for any questions that I can answer from any of the members, and just appreciate being included.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the invite today. And I stand between everybody here and lunch, so I'll make this brief. So Andrew Lai, representing our Rio Tinto. So we've got 2 major mines in the US. So we mine borates in California and copper in Utah. And we're trying to get our resolution project here in Arizona, which can supply up to 3,700 jobs and 25% of the US copper demand locally. And we've been a political football, as everyone would have seen more recently over the last 12 months. I think, we look at copper itself, Steve, you touched on most of the facts there. We were 37% import reliant in the US for copper in 2020. It was 45% last year, and domestic production remained static. So we are seeing that increase in copper demand going to the green economy of the future, whether it be the cell phones, the electric vehicles, or renewable energy, which we're part of. So we need to actually make sure we're part of the solution when we go through this and actually create the local domestic supply. We talk about critical minerals. So there's a mineral called tellurium, which goes into solar panels. We have a copper smelter up at our business in Utah, and in May, we'll start producing that. It'll be the first source of local domestic supply. It's a drop in the ocean compared to what's actually coming through, about 10 tons of 1,000 tons used annually in the US, but it's a start. I think we need to be part of the solution, look at our own supply chains and the way we operate our mines to actually maximize the value and production of these critical minerals. It won't add much to us, but it's really, really important to make sure we're part of that solution. Similarly, we've been working with the Department of Defense on some rhenium recovery. Rhenium's a mineral which goes into turbine blades of jet fighters to make sure they actually are a lot stronger and stay up in the air. So making sure we're working with the government, being part of the solution, is absolutely critical. It's interesting, one of the reasons the EIS was rescinded for the Resolution Copper project was making sure we had the tribal voice heard. 4 years ago, we started a partnership with the US Forest Service called the Tribal Monitor Program, and we visit site tomorrow. We'll share a bit more about it. But this is making sure the tribal voices are heard. They walk along beside archaeologists. Archaeologists look at the ground and look at bits of rock, artifacts left behind. The tribes truly value the entire surrounding. So building this tribal ecological knowledge is something we've done proudly at Resolution, surveying over 60,000 acres of land, a lot of it yours, Lisa. But making sure we actually understood the full footprint and really building that in. So I think we've been an example of the way this could work. The government said they would actually review the EIS for adequacy. That's complete. It was done 6 months ago. And believe it or not, there was no deficiencies. The last outstanding bit has actually been additional tribal consultation. So 15 tribes are invited to consult. There's just one tribe who's continuing that consultation process, and we hope to have that concluded in the next 3 months. At least that's what the Department of Justice has told the courts. So I think we're really looking forward to actually getting the project back online by mid-year, and we want to be part of the solution. Mining only uses less than 2% of the water in Arizona. We've got to actually make sure we're using it wisely. We recognize that. We haven't got the best reputation. It's great to hear from Paul that he's actually getting a bill through to actually do some work on the remediation of abandoned mines. We need to be part of the solution. When we get to Resolution Copper tomorrow, we'll show you some of the reclamation work we've done trying to fix 100 years of mining at Superior itself. I think we need to recognize these regional towns and the important role they play. Poor old town of Superior is really looking forward to the benefits it can get through the project. And we get plenty of questions from the mayor. When are you going to do this so we can actually start to see the benefits back in the rural areas of the state? But just thank you very much and look forward to hosting you tomorrow, and hand it over to you.
I think this has been an excellent conversation. I think with it, Daryl, I think we're behind time, so we probably have to wrap it up, right? Okay. So if you have questions for anybody here, but especially these folks, since they didn't get questions, please ask them during lunch. To me, very exciting, very interesting, and let's go to lunch. Right?
Just so you all know, lunch is back around the corner there, and we'll just kind of get a briefing on the facility here.